Good morning. I'm doing well.
Yeah, that was that
Just
was
hanging with
that was
my
that was the big
2-year-old.
yawn of I'm gonna get coffee while you're doing your interview. I'm literally like I listened to it, but like I'm gonna be making my coffee because the brain she's slow today. You are on with Sam. You're gonna have a lovely interview. I'm gonna hit record as a backup. I'm just gonna shut up and let you guys have a great conversation.
Good morning, Sam.
Hey,
Thanks for chatting with me.
Trip. Hey, thank you so much. You know what? I don't know if you listen to my show or whatever. We are always slobberingly grateful for every guest we get and someone of your magnitude. So, as always, we have to do the customary over the top introduction from my man, Trip Jennings. So, let's get into it.
All
People,
right.
you may remember him as the cover model of March 2010's edition of Canoe and Kayak magazine. But since then, he has found a new love and risk taking that doesn't necessarily involve whitewater rapids. Wherever it's going down, whether it's going to be on week-long missions to collect elephant dung to stop poaching, curbing wildfires in western USA, or almost giving his left eye to stop injustice in the streets of his hometown of Portland, Oregon. Shout out Rip City. A man whose very presence on this show has boosted our journalistic integrity by tenfold. He has been around the world and to cover environmental issues and lead research expeditions into places like Congo, Papua New Guinea, the Amazon, and right now in your eyes and ear holes. Ladies and gentlemen, Trip Jennings, welcome to the podcast.
Yes, that's the best intro I've ever had. I'm so happy to be here.
Man, I have been watching, and in that introduction, I have been watching you and not knowing I'm watching you, whether it been on that Geo, whether it been Discovery, and now with Balance Media. And I didn't know this until like I had to do homework for this interview. I watched a TED Talk. I watched a TED Talk about risk
Oh,
taking.
yeah.
And you change your hair pretty often. Let's just put it like that. Uh, but now with with this new documentary, Elemental, you have taken something that, and I'm a Midwestern. I'm from Detroit, so this is all new information to me. I always see it on the news, and I do have that callous, if you will, to say like, man, why don't those guys just move? And
Right.
every year, it happens every year. But after watching this, we learned a lot. And I guess opening it up, I got a chance to see sort of like the was this a conscious decision showing the escape or putting you right into, I don't want to give too much of the documentary away, but you put us right in the middle of an escape from Paradise, California. The fears, the emotions, the danger. Why was it so important to start off the documentary that way?
Well, I mean, wildfire is a problem that even if you're in Detroit, even if you're in, wherever Midwest, like you're gonna see the smoke, you're gonna smell the smoke. But I don't know if you've felt the fear and the like intensity that the people experience when they're evacuating, right? And that is sadly it's happening to more and more people, right? As the climate warms, and as fire season gets longer, sometimes it gets a lot drier, and we're just seeing that happen in more and more places than I think a lot of people expected. People in Oregon hadn't had that happen, and in 2020, that's what we expect. That's what we experienced, kind of the same thing. And then we're seeing that in Colorado in the middle of winter 2 years ago, right? So so I really wanted to take people to that moment, the most intense emotional moment. When a family is trying to reunite in the middle of one of the worst, natural disasters that's really almost ever happened in this country, one of the most difficult and trying moments of their lives. And the mother, she says, I was just trying to touch my children because as they were driving through this fire, she didn't know if it was the last time she'd ever be able to touch them, right? And and that for me, 2018 in Paradise, California, I think that was a turning point for people in fire where they were like, okay, what we are doing is not working. We have to do something different. We have to change the way we approach fire, not just during fires, but in between fires. And that's the idea of the film. And we found what that is, and that's what the film is about.
Now I'm walking a tightrope here because I don't want to give up any of the film, but I do have to ask, um, instead of just straight up fighting the fires, there is a question of just coexisting. Like, personally, I'm torn because it's like a form of, I don't want to say defeatism, but it's like, this is just going to happen. That I guess that's the feeling I got. But shouldn't we be avoiding that?
Well, look, it's not that this is just going to happen. It's that we live in places where it's always happened. And I think that what we have to do as humans, in this sort of like new world that we're in, as we are so, there's so many of us, we have to remember that we can't fully stop all of the Earth systems that have happened since time immemorial before we were here, right? And we had this nice little period where, between technology and getting lucky on climate, it looked like we could stop fire, right? And no one says, oh, I can't just accept that hurricanes are going to happen. No one says, I can't just accept that rain's going to happen. We don't have hurricane fighters. We don't have rain fighters or tornado fighters, right? We have firefighters because it used to work really well. And look, we're always going to have firefighters. We need them. They are going to help protect us and save lives. But we have to accept that there are limits, just like any of the other weather that we experience, right? So we've got to prepare in between fires, and it's more than what we've been told in the past, right? There is a narrative that like, okay, cool, we can just do some stuff in the forest and that'll be enough, but it's not. We see that over and over. It's not. So I think it's a really positive vision of us being able to live and thrive with fire because we can't fully stop fire anymore. We know that.
Well, let's rewind this a little bit. Because like I said, I'm picking my questions very carefully because I don't want to give it's a lot of information in here, but you yourself got personally involved with this because there was a lot of misinformation given, whether it be in public or from politicians or whatever, about these wildfires. So what was the, pardon the pun, spark in you that says, you know what, I need to investigate this. Let me put my full weight behind this?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think misinformation is one way to say it, but also just, we have lived in this landscape as people who aren't native to this place, right, for a couple hundred years, and we came with our assumptions, and we nurtured those assumptions, right? And our assumptions were that we could control wildfire, right? And I think that the way that we control wildfire is by fighting it, right? And like I said, that worked for a while, but and if that's not going to work, then the way that we do it is we pretend that the problem is in the forest, not in the way that we build and the way that we live in the forest and where we live in the forest, right? So I don't know if it's misinformation or if it's just, over and over about climate change adaptation. What I see is that we're bringing old notions to a new problem, right? We're bringing these like sort of stories that like, okay, you can control wildfire. The problem is in the forest. If we just go to the forest, then we can deal with the problem. And what we're seeing with fire and so many other issues like this is we got to turn that on its head, right? And then we can live and thrive with it, right? So if we say, oh, the problem is actually where and how we build our homes, and if we just change some things, we'll be all right. I think that's a really liberating and exciting moment, right? Instead of just being like, we have to be passive victims of these giant fires. We don't have to be passive victims of these fires anymore. And that's what I want to turn on its head with this film.
Now, one thing I like what you just said. You talked about the old notion of fighting a fire or people having these old school ideas. And we all know people just love changing their mind. So it's so apparent. But one of the most important things I thought that was a good point that you put in there, and sorry if I'm spoiling this, you gave climate trends going back to the 50s all the way to now, just to kind of better understand how we as a people understand fire behavior. Why was that important to show the mirror to the people themselves to say, like, look, this is what is happening.
Yeah, well, so it turns out that, we feel like we have a lot of fire right now, right? Because I mean, right, and we do have a lot of fire, right? Like as we speak, there's like something like 150 times the number of acres burning in Alberta, Canada, than there should be by this time of the year, right? There's a lot more fire now than there was a generation ago. But if you go back 3, 4 generations, you can see that fire goes through these big cycles, right?
Mm-hmm.
We remember the Dust Bowl. We remember it being a really hot, dry time. And that also dried out our forests in the United States, right? So in the 30s and the 20s, we had actually even more fire than we have today. And then we went through this cool, wet period where firefighting worked really well, and we expanded into these places that burn, right? And so we shouldn't blame ourselves for believing that we can stop all fires, because we did for like 2 generations. But now the climate is warming, it's hotter and it's drier, fire season is longer, and that's not working anymore. So I mean, I don't want to beat anybody up here, right? Because like we all went through this, or like our parents went through this and told us the stories of firefighting working. So it makes sense that we would think that. It just doesn't work anymore. And so that's why the whole like, second, almost more than half of the film is about like, okay, here's the research that shows how we do this.
Okay. All right. Since you touched on it, I'm taking your lead so we don't spoil anything. But you talked about the second half of the film. And in the second half of the film, well, the whole film, if you keeping it real, you focused a lot more on science than you do political angles. And you did address there are some strong political angles when it comes down to changing the landscape of housing or just how we govern. So was that a conscious decision to stay more towards the science than it is more of the politics of it?
Yeah, I mean, look, what we wanted to do is say this is what's happening. This is what's going on. And this is how the people who are looking at this very in depth, and in a way, I think science is important because scientific method helps us get away from, break out of these stories, these narratives that we've told ourselves for hundreds of years sometimes, right? And it says, let's test this hypothesis. Oh, that's wrong. Let's test another hypothesis. Oh, that looks promising, right? And so that breaks us out of our conventional way of thinking sometimes, right? And I think that's true about fire. And we stayed away from politics because I think, we got to understand what's actually going on in order to be able to change politics. And I think the politics will follow, because the thing about fire that's so exciting is we know how to solve this problem. The solutions are there. And the destruction is only increasing. I mean, from 2004 to 2018, we saw 10,000% increase in homes destroyed, right? So eventually, politicians and decision makers have to start looking around and saying, what do we do differently? Because that's unacceptable. That's not, we're doing our best. We're spending hundreds of millions of dollars on this problem. And 10,000% in the wrong direction. We can't keep doing that. So eventually the politics will come to this. They'll come to us. We don't have to go to them.
Okay. And that conventional form of thinking, you did break mine personally. Because my own way of thinking was this. Oh, just cut down more trees. You cut down more trees, this wouldn't happen. End of story. That was it. Drop the mic, I walk away. That's what I thought before seeing this movie. I know you say it in the movie, so I would feel more comfortable asking this question. Why is that not necessarily the course of action?
Right. Great question. I mean, look, first off, let's talk about this. In California, 80% of homes that burn are not in forests, right? Let that sink in. You could cut down every tree in California, which has arguably the largest fire problem in the country. You could pave every forest, and you'd still lose 80% of the homes that burn in wildfires. That's not enough, And so that's true if you look at the whole country, it's over half of the homes that burn not in forests, right? There are grass fires in the Midwest. There's chaparral, which is like shrublands all over the West and Southwest, right? And they burn. Every ecosystem burns. And so the other thing is, okay, so let's say you go in and you cut down the trees. What we're seeing is it may decrease the fire intensity, or it may not, depending upon weather. And when you cut those trees down, you're releasing carbon dioxide into the atmosphere because, of course, 60% of every tree is carbon, right? That goes into the atmosphere, that warms the climate, that makes the fire problem worse. So when we're looking at solutions like this, we got to say, okay, does it work? Okay, is it getting us in the direction we want to go? Is it decarbonizing? Is it not contributing to the problem? Right? And because these are adaptation questions, we've got to ask as we move into a new world, a new climate, right? Does it work? Is it durable? No, trees grow back. You got to keep doing it over and over and over again. And does it work? No, again, 10,000% increase in just 14 years. If you look at 2004 to 2018 in home destruction. So yeah, that's why it doesn't work. And I think the big thing is that we put the problem in the forest. And when we think of the problem in the forest, we don't think about changing our homes and our communities. And that's what science shows works.
Okay.
And I just want to say, look, the changes, it's not like we got to live in a concrete ammo bunker. You can live in a normal house in a normal neighborhood. You just got to make some changes because it is the details.
Elaborate. You know what? I'm going to say elaborate because
let's go there. Let's go there.
Yeah, there's going to be people who listen to this and they're going to then watch the movie. So yeah, let's get into it.
Yeah, totally. Right. So look, it's the details, right? So you have these big wildfires, whether or not they're grass, chaparral, shrubs, or trees. And in windy conditions, that's when you lose the most homes. And what happens is you have embers blowing way in front of the fire front, getting thrown miles at times, right? And so they go over whatever sort of minor differences in vegetation there is in fuels, right? And that's what burns well over half the homes is these embers, right? 80% of the homes. And all an ember needs is a little, just a sort of a friendly place for an ember in a home, right? So think of it like this. You have pine needles in your gutters. An ember lands in your gutter. It ignites the pine needles. Let's say those gutters are vinyl. It catches your gutters on fire, burns your home down, right? It's not this 200-foot wall of flame that we imagine, right? Because streets and parking lots and things like that, they cut down those big flames once we get into an urban environment. So we just think of all the little details, all the little places where an ember could get into a home and find a place to burn, right? During a wind event, let's say you have single pane windows and something hits your window, a branch hits your window, breaks one pane, an ember gets in, burns your home from the inside out. You don't have little wire vent covers on your soffit vents that ventilate your attic. You have one little ember get sucked in those vents, lands in your attic, burns your home from the inside out. You have wood fencing between your neighbor's house and your house. Your neighbor's house catches on fire. The fence catches on fire, wicks the fire to your house, burns it down just like that. So it's these little details. And it's also the relationship between our garden beds and our walkways, right? So 5 feet around the home, we do non-combustible materials, concrete, rocks, something nice like that, not bark mulch, not your garden bed. You move your garden bed 5 feet away, right? Because of course our garden beds eventually, we're not going to weed them perfectly every day, especially if there's a fire. Ember lands in there, catches everything like your bush is on fire, catches your roof on fire, your home burns down. So my point is, it's a science of the most important ways to keep embers from burning your home down. That's the most important thing. And then the next is you move like 5 feet out and then 30 feet out. And you control some of the vegetation in your yard. You just thin it out a little bit. You don't want big trees right up against your house. And that prevents the big flames from getting close to you. With those little things, I mean, it's amazing how much difference it makes. It can be the difference between losing your home and not losing your home in a fire.
Now, I want to kind of zoom back a little bit more, go a little bit more behind the scenes of this film, because there are these conversations, tough conversations you had to have with quite a few people, just being in there. Without naming names, what did you have one where you're just like, oh my God, this person is totally not listening to me? Because I could, without spoiling it, I can almost guess who it was, but this person just doesn't get it. So how did you overcome those struggles where you're just kind of like, come on,
Huh.
how are you not getting
Well,
this?
I mean, look, we have a lot of conversations like that, right? And people have come out after the film too and said, you know, we don't agree with you. And look, there are great, like, well-meaning people who've devoted their lives to this, sort of the opposite of this, right? There are a lot of smart people who tried this experiment, which was to thin forests, to control fires in the forest. We've tried that for like 40 years. That means that a lot of people have had 20 plus, 30 plus year careers in doing doing an experiment, right? In
Right.
testing this. They said 40 years ago, people were like, oh, we've suppressed fire. That means that there's more fuel in the forest to burn. So we gotta cut it out, and then maybe we burn some of it, right? To get it out. So to reduce the fuels and take trees out of the forest so it doesn't burn, right? And that's just how science works. You come up with an idea and you test it. And boy, we have been testing this idea. So there are a lot of people who have spent their lives and their careers believing legitimately that they are keeping their communities safer and spending hundreds of millions of taxpayer dollars on it, and it's not working. That experiment has shown to be not successful, right? And that is a hard pill to swallow if you just spent 30 years of your life on it. And those people, however well-meaning they were and are, have got to step aside and let us do this the next thing, right? We got to try the next hypothesis that shows promise in labs. So look, yes, we have hard conversations all the time with politicians, with scientists, with with homeowners who don't want to change their home. I get that. That all makes sense. And I'm here for it. Like, it's a conversation that we have to have as the world warms. It's just the way it is, you know? And so this film is a conversation starter. And a lot of times that conversation is hard. And sometimes that conversation is heated. And what I'm saying is, like, totally. Was there
Right.
one particular one that was like worse than others? I don't know. Or like more
Okay, I
difficult
wasn't
than
there.
others.
I'm only going
You
by the
know,
film. I'm only going by the film because it. Okay, there is one character who I don't want to call him a character because it's a documentary, but in the middle of the film where that person is so staunch on what they believe in, and as you put that in with the 20 years, now I was like, oh yeah, I totally see that because if you change his mind, I'm outing him because I've given more details. Career's over. Career's over. It's just like everything I just did just didn't matter.
right.
So
Right. And so
I'll
look,
let.
but I look at it differently. What I say to that sort of person is like, look, thank you for your service.
Mhm.
Science, when you do science, you have to test your hypothesis. And that means some hypotheses will be wrong. and,
Yeah.
and we just did this national experiment for 40 years that was wrong. And boy, yeah, it's hard. That means hard conversations.
Yeah.
And but what I say again, thank you for your service. We wouldn't have known it was wrong if you hadn't done it. And that's how we progress.
That's a double-edged sword. If my career's on the line, hey, we didn't know you were messing up for 40 years until we got in here. That,
I mean, look, yeah. Okay.
I
Yeah,
know,
I
I know.
guess.
Look, there's no wrong answer because you needed that to happen to find a new
Yeah,
solution. So I totally
yeah,
understand that.
yeah.
So
But I mean, look, there's also there's also a lot of people who benefit
exactly.
um
That's
from
what I
this
was
idea,
getting at.
right? The idea that we can just cut more trees down and be safer from fire would be an awesome win-win for the timber industry, right? If that was true, it'd be great because we'd just be like, oh, the safe thing to do is to go in and log. And we do a lot of logging on the West Coast. And it'd be great because people would make money and we would be safer. But that's not how it is, right? And so Yeah, if you want to log and you're like really, really committed to that right now, um, you know, I actually think that there's a lot of common cause between the timber industry and what we're talking about, right? Because
Right.
if the timber industry doesn't make money when, you know, 500,000 of their new teeny little trees burns in a wildfire, and if we keep on, you know, thinking that the timber industry, by doing what they're doing, is making us safer and reducing like, you know, fire risk, they're gonna keep burning too. Like we both are in the same boat. we
Exactly.
gotta we gotta look at this for what it is.
Now, we're getting up to it, so I got a few more questions. We're getting around to it, but I need to know, how do you feel when you originally set out to make this movie versus how you feel while working on the movie versus the end result? Have your mind changed, or did did you achieve? Do you think you achieved what you set out to do originally?
Mm. Well, I set out, I mean, you know, this film is the process of my discovery about this issue, right? Like when you look at it, it's pretty linear. It's like, okay, this is bad. What are we currently doing? Okay, it's not working. What do we need to do next? Right. And that is like, that was the process that I went through. And I started out thinking that I was going to make a film about, yes, fire can be destructive, but fire is also really good for ecosystems, right? That was my whole thing. Like, so, okay, so let's do more fire. Let's do more prescribed burns. Let's like let more fires burn. And then Paradise burned down, and I was like, 19,000 homes and 86 people died. Like, that's crazy. And I didn't know about home hardening. I didn't know about so much of this in the beginning of this project. But I did know that there was a real big disconnect between, I think, the best available science and the public conversation. It just wasn't exactly what I thought at first. And so yeah, I mean, you go on this journey with me, the director. You know, I'm not in it, but like it's all of these questions that the narrator, David Oyelowo, wow, what a narrator.
Oh yeah.
When he asks these questions in the narration, like that was my question. I was just like, okay, so what about this? Let's go research it, you know? And then we come out with this I think a real path forward, which is exciting.
Okay. Selfishly, I have to ask this question. When you sit back and you look at your body of work, of all the adventures you've done, you're getting caught in wildfires, you're breaking up riots, you're doing all this stuff. Does a piece of you go back to thinking, man, I could just be on a canoe right now, chilling? Does it just like
Oh yeah,
does it come
every
up?
day, every day. I mean, especially, you know, I'm in year 6 with this film, right?
Yeah.
You can tell I love talking about it. You can tell I'm excited about this
Yeah.
stuff, right? Like I, I don't know, man. Part of it is like I love taking ideas that we thought were true that aren't serving us anymore and saying, hey, it's not working anymore. Let's move forward. That, I don't know, it excites me. So that keeps me going, you know? I mean, whatever it is about social justice issues, houselessness, fires, you know, other environmental issues, you know, because I believe that stories have this power to like transcend some of the politics and some of the like headbutting that we do, you know, and so that gives me so much energy and so much excitement to be like, hey, there is a path forward, and people's human stories can help us see it and get there. Like that just really, yeah, I mean that makes me that keeps me motivated, I guess, from just instead of just like going and sitting on a canoe. But hey, but I still do that, man. I take my kid on a 6-day wilderness canoe trip every summer. So I
I
get my
hope
sun
so.
still.
Like I would hope so. Like while you're documenting these awesome stories and you're going down and you're fighting causes, I would hope you have a little quote downtime, which
You
is
gotta.
whitewater rafting. Okay,
What,
yeah.
dude, I've gotten chill. I've gotten so mellow in my old age now. I go flat water canoeing.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. You scaled it down a little bit.
I
So
have. I'm taking it down a notch, man.
I would hope so because your every day is like borderline superhero fighting injustice, fighting fires, doing this. And let's just calm down a little bit. Let's just go in the water. Everybody's cool with that? Okay, cool. 1 week
It's
a
good for you.
year, I'm chilling.
You see
But
me.
but Trip, Thank you so much. I know we're up against it. You got a full schedule. I'm just glad I got a little bit of your time today. The name of the movie is called Elemental. I need you to look in this camera. It is the 13th of June coming out. I got it right? That's worldwide.
That's right. Hey, but I gotta say, it's Elemental Reimagine Wildfire, because there's this other Elemental coming out by somebody else, Pixar, I don't know.
Yep.
So Elemental Reimagine Wildfire, elementalfilm.com.
All right. Trip, thank you so much for just kicking in with us for a hot second. The movie's great. I hope people learned as much as I did, and I hope you changed some minds. You changed mine. So, Trip, you're welcome back to come back to the podcast anytime you want.
Oh, thank you, sir. This has been a lot of fun. I appreciate you, and I'm sure I'll see you again soon.
All right. Thanks, Trip. Have a great one.
Cheers. You
Bye.
too.